If you or your students ever get stuck in triangle pose right after the initial transition into the pose, it's probably not because your hamstrings are tight. It's actually probably because the way that you've transitioned in doesn't actually work for your body, and the pelvis is getting stuck on the thigh bone. I just created a video about my 3 favorite versions of triangle pose to practice and teach. You can check it out here. But in that conversation, I talked through how to transition into triangle pose, and I began to address this issue about rotating the pelvis too far away from the front leg and getting stuck in that transition. And I realized it deserved its own quick conversation. So let me break down for you a much more efficient, integrated way to transition into triangle pose that's gonna help you and your students maximize your pelvic range of motion without unnecessarily getting stuck. More often than not, we enter this pose by rotating the pelvis away from the front leg. So if my right leg is leading, commonly people will rotate their pelvis away from it and then tilt their pelvis towards the leg. So we have 2 pelvic actions when we're entering the pose. First is lateral rotation. Second is lateral tilt. And I know those can be confusing, but that's real simple. This is rotation of the pelvis. This is tilt of the pelvis, okay? And a lot of times what happens, and I'll show it a couple of different ways, but we'll do our best here. This is the right leg leading. So imagine we're gonna go into triangle pose on the right. A lot of times what'll happen, everybody, is we'll turn the pelvis away from the front leg, but then as we turn the pelvis away from the front leg and then we try to tilt into the pose, the pelvis is actually getting stuck. So for some people, when they laterally rotate the pelvis and then try to tilt it, the pelvis, or more accurately, the acetabulum, which is the hip socket, gets stuck on the neck of the femur. They just literally get impinged together. And the thing is that when people get stuck at this level and they're really high up, it's almost never a stretch. So again, it's not that stuckness or that inability to laterally tilt the pelvis after you've laterally rotated the pelvis is not usually because the hamstrings have hit their limited range of motion. It's because the hip just stops moving. And that's the telltale sign. It doesn't feel like a significant hamstring demand. It just feels like the hips have stopped moving. So what we want to do here is change the order of operations. Instead of initiating the pose by the pelvis rotating away from the front leg and then tilting where it can often get stuck, what we want to do is we want to turn our pelvis towards the front leg and then tilt our pelvis forward like we're doing a forward bend. Then our pelvis is not going to get stuck. Instead, our hand is going to go to a much lower, better base. We can base that bottom hand on the floor or the front shin or ankle or block, whatever it is. And then once we get that pelvis that's tilted forward into the pose, then we can laterally rotate the hip up like we conventionally would. We're just reversing the order of operations. Instead of turning the hips away and then tilting, we're turning the hips towards, tilting, then turning the hips away. You will find that this is an entirely 100% different and infinitely better experience for your students. So for me teaching it, it's simple. Let's say we're coming into it from Warrior 2. Have everybody straighten the front leg, take your hands to your hips, turn your hips a little bit towards your front leg. Great. Tilt your pelvis forward, root through your bottom arm. Now, rotate your top hip and your torso up and away from the front leg till they stop. Good. So forth and so on with the cues. Quickly before I wrap, 2 things. Number 1, if you are coming into the pose by rotating the pelvis away from the front leg and then laterally tilting, and it's going great for you, you're not getting stuck, you're fine. I don't want to create a problem for you where there is no problem for you. I don't want to create a problem for your students when there is no problem for your students. This is really about solving a problem when people are getting stuck. My go-to preference for coming into this pose is to turn the hips towards the front leg like I've been speaking to you. But if it's not a problem for you, if you're not getting stuck and you like to turn the hips away from the front leg, before you transition to the pose, that's fine. Totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Stick with it. But if you see someone that is struggling with what I'm talking about, please help them transition to the pose this way instead. Second thing is this. A lot of times people will come into the pose by kind of cocking the hip, okay? They'll kind of like cock the hip or bump the hip back and reach through the bottom arm. That's completely fine. But again, that isn't necessarily going to address this situation. So if doing that little preparatory cock of the hips or that bump of the hips and that reach of the bottom arm, if that works and you're not getting stuck, totally fine, you can work on it. But if people are doing that and still getting stuck in the pose, then we're not addressing the real issue, which is the pelvis is stuck on the femur, okay? So I want you to know as a student and as a teacher how to really sort this out, because I would say at least for every 15 students in a general yoga class, at least one of them is struggling with this. And this is the quick, simple, easy solution to help them feel more integrated in the pose and to get the benefits they really deserve. As always, if you want to learn more, make sure to check out the links in my bio. I'd love to practice and train with you. Also, everybody, definitely check out, if you haven't already, that 3 versions of triangle pose. I think it'll fit really nicely with this conversation.